In October 2020, Formula One driver Max Verstappen crashed his car during a practice run. He got on his radio, cursed out the other driver, and called him a Mongol. The internet did not cancel him. Mostly, the public just looked confused. People genuinely did not know the word was a slur. They thought he was just using a quirky, vintage synonym for idiot. That is the most Mongolian thing that has ever happened to Mongolia. They built one of the largest empires in human history. The world forgot. Then the world took their name as a medical term for being stupid. Most countries worry about being hated. Mongolia has a much worse problem. They are entirely forgotten. In the 1860s, a British doctor named John Langdon Down was studying patients with intellectual disabilities. He noticed some of his patients had facial features that vaguely reminded him of people from the Asian steppes. Instead of moving on with his day, he decided this condition was a literal evolutionary step backward. He theorized that these patients were reverting to an inferior race. He named the condition Mongolism. The medical establishment spent the next century building on this. They called it science.
So why didn't I flinch? Because the laws of science differ fundamentally from those of...
It was what corporate marketing teams would call a flawless brand acquisition. They took an entire ethnicity and rebranded it as a synonym for stupid. The World Health Organization finally dropped the term in 1965. They did not do this out of the goodness of their hearts. They did it because an actual delegation from the Mongolian People's Republic showed up and formally asked the medical community to stop using their ancestors as a punchline, but the damage was permanent. For a Mongolian, that erasure is sovereign. Picture a Mongolian girl in a 7th grade classroom in Europe. Her history teacher announces that Mongols do not exist anymore. Ancient barbarians who simply faded away. She doesn't argue, you never argue back. You just wait for the bell to ring. Because explaining that your entire culture is alive and currently very pissed off is not something you can fit in before lunch. You are the 18th largest country on Earth by landmass. You could fit Germany, France, and Spain inside your borders and still have room for a decent-sized parking lot. But your entire economy makes up exactly 0.02% of the global total. There are mid-tier shopping malls in New Jersey, with more daily foot traffic than your country has citizens. The world either forgets you exist, assumes you died off in the 13th century, or uses your name as an insult on live television. So how does a tiny, forgotten nation respond to being the world's punchline? You could invest in soft power, you could build a robust tourism board, or you could walk past the bra aisle of a lingerie store in Ulaanbaatar, take a left, and find a room full of men in SS uniforms doing the Heil salute to a bust of Genghis Khan. If you are looking for the headquarters of Tsagaan, one of Mongolia's most notorious neo-Nazi organizations, the first thing you will encounter is a wall of push-up bras. Their official base of operations is neatly tucked away behind a cramped lingerie shop in the capital city. You have Mongolian men wearing black leather greatcoats decorated with swastikas. They patrol the streets. They claim to protect the purity of the Mongolian bloodline. The ideology they are cosplaying literally categorizes them as subhuman. Hitler singled out Mongolian-looking POWs for execution. Modern European neo-Nazis attack Mongolian migrants today. When reporters point this out, the response is spectacular. One leader calmly explained that they do not agree with extremism or the whole World War II thing. They are firmly against all the killings. They just really support the ideology. That is the Mongolian ultranationalist pitch. We love Hitler's aesthetic, not the killing, just the vibe. In 2016, a top Mongolian rapper named Amarmandak Sukbatar performed on stage in Ulaanbaatar wearing a traditional red robe. The robe was embroidered with a swastika, which in Asia is an ancient religious symbol that predates fascism by a few thousand years. A Russian diplomat in the audience saw the swastika, assumed it was a Nazi provocation, attacked the rapper with a bottle, and put him in a coma for 10 days. Cultural misunderstandings usually end with an awkward apology. This one ended in the intensive care unit. In 2013, the leadership of Tsagaan realized that beating up foreigners in the streets was not great for public relations. They initiated a corporate pivot. They rebranded as an environmental protection agency. They kept the Gestapo coats, but their new mission was auditing foreign mining companies for pollution violations. They went from committing hate crimes to checking soil samples. Same uniforms, completely different PowerPoint presentation. It is very easy to laugh at this. I want to laugh at this. But these groups have a body count. In 2008, the leader of a different nationalist group called Blue Mongol was convicted of murder. He did not kill a Chinese foreigner. He killed his own daughter's Mongolian boyfriend. His crime was that he had simply gone to China to study. The fear of outside contamination was so absolute that proximity to a Chinese textbook was considered a capital offense. This is where the laughter stops and the geography begins. Mongolia is a landlocked nation of just 3.5 million people. To the north sits Russia, an authoritarian giant with 144 million people. To the south sits China, an authoritarian giant with 1.4 billion people. Mongolia has roughly 2 people per square kilometer. It is the least densely populated sovereign nation on Earth. And yet the defining psychological trait of the country is a claustrophobic terror of being overwhelmed. The math justifies the terror. Mongolia relies on Russia for 90% of its energy supplies. One country holds the thermostat for your entire entire winter. Meanwhile, 80% of Mongolia's exports, mostly coal, go directly to China. Your southern neighbor holds your entire wallet. It is the geopolitical equivalent of living in a studio apartment where your abusive ex-husband controls the electricity and your terrifying former boss signs your paychecks. The Republic of China and Taiwan still officially claimed Mongolia as its territory within living memory. Just across the southern border sits Inner Mongolia, a region controlled by Beijing, where millions of ethnic Mongolians are watching their language and culture be systematically scrubbed from the curriculum. Mongolians look across that border and see exactly what happens to them if they ever lose sovereignty. The West loves to lecture authoritarian neighbors about Mongolia's democratic miracle. Nobody mentions that 0.02% of global GDP means your democracy is completely invisible. You can hold elections every 4 years, nobody is watching, nobody is sending aid, nobody is coming. The hatred toward China was artificially installed. During the Sino-Soviet split of the 1960s and 70s, Mongolia was a satellite state of the USSR. The Soviets needed Mongolia to stay loyal, so they uploaded a software patch into the Mongolian education system. They taught Mongolians to fear the Chinese so deeply that they would constantly run to Moscow for protection. The Soviet Union collapsed 33 years ago. It birthed a word, Erlies, double seeds, a derogatory term for people of mixed Han Chinese and Mongol descent. In Mongolia, Erlies is a political weapon. During election seasons, accusing your opponent of having Chinese blood is a standard campaign strategy. But notice who takes the damage. Anti-Chinese hate speech rarely touches actual Chinese citizens or powerful Chinese executives. The violence and the rhetoric are almost entirely directed inward. If you do business with Chinese companies, if you study in Beijing, if you date a foreigner, you become the enemy. The hatred eats itself. You do not hate outsiders. You hate the part of yourself that might need them. Which brings us to the most incredible breaking point in modern Mongolian history. By the spring of 2025, the reality of living in Ulaanbaatar had become economically lethal. People were paying nearly half their monthly income just in taxes, while barely making enough to cover food and rent. As one 28-year-old protester put it, they were no longer living paycheck to paycheck. They were living loan to loan, debt to debt. In 2022, a massive coal theft scandal rocked the country. Minerals were being illegally transported across the Chinese border, resulting in an estimated loss of $12 billion to the Mongolian economy. A year later, American prosecutors sought the forfeiture of 2 luxury apartments in New York City owned by a former Mongolian prime minister, bought with the proceeds of unlawfully awarded mining contracts. The country was bleeding out, and in the middle of this crushing poverty, a 23-year-old woman posted a photo on Instagram. She was the fiancée of Temulen, the son of the sitting prime minister. The photo featured her staggering collection of luxury handbags, a high-end ring, and a Mercedes-Benz. The prime minister, a man named Oyun Erdene, had built his entire political brand on fighting corruption. He literally rose to power by organizing mass protests against the wealthy elite. Then his own son's girlfriend went on social media to show off her imported leather goods, and the entire country exploded. On May 14th, 2025, young Mongolians flooded the streets of Ulaanbaatar. They looked at those Instagram handbags and realized they were paying for them. 3 weeks later, the prime minister resigned. He lost a motion of confidence in the parliament. 44 members supported him. He needed 64, so he packed his things and he left. A country so unstable that a designer purse can cause a government collapse. It is actually the exact opposite. The citizens got angry. They marched. They put the leader to a parliamentary vote. He lost. He stepped down peacefully. Try doing that in Beijing. Try doing that in Moscow. Mongolia is a functioning democracy, totally surrounded by dictatorships. They are pulling off a magic trick. Every single day they wake up and hold an election. Mongolians do not hate China because they have real experiences with Chinese people. They hate China precisely because they lack those experiences. The younger Mongolians who actually study in Beijing come back with a very different story. The world forgot Mongolia. Mongolia responded by making themselves impossible to ignore. They are loud, they are complicated, and they are aggressively alive. They don't hate everyone. They just refuse to disappear. Oh, and there's one more thing. You know what Mongolians sing during Christmas?